We have to live by the rule. You either work or you fight. A stark choice laid out by Vladimir Zelensky at a time fraught with political and military challenges. An existential war against Russia now heading into its third year. The uncertainty of future Western support. But for Ukrainians, there is one overriding imperative. Vladimir Putin will not stop the war unless he is stopped. The Russians initially attacked from the north, south and east, but their widespread assault and an attempt to take Kyiv, the capital, were repelled. A major counter-offensive in autumn 2022 liberated swathes of territory around Kharkiv and the city of Kherson in the south. But the Russians dug in, eventually taking the town of Bakhmut after huge losses. Another Ukrainian counter-offensive last summer held off any Russian advance, but it did fail to make any significant gains, with the battle lines now seemingly frozen. We'll have our special interview with President Zelensky in a moment. But first, this report from Porrick O'Brien, who's been speaking to troops on the front line, on the ground.
They're calling it a frozen conflict. But if you're the Russian crew of this tank under fire, or the Ukrainian mechanized brigade who released this video, complete with soundtrack, this conflict doesn't feel frozen, it feels white hot. That said, the 600-mile-long front line has barely moved in months. After Ukraine's failed second counter-offensive in the autumn, the conflict has settled into a grinding attritional fight from static positions. Anton Storchak says he has plenty of fight left in him, despite punishing rotations into places like Bakhmut. But he is exhausted.
We all are tired. We are deadly tired. After these 2 years, the guys, and actually I know it on my skin also.
This speaks to one of the things that will preoccupy Zelensky and his top brass this year: recruiting and training new soldiers, resting and rotating older ones. The 3rd Assault Brigade today in Ukraine, or an hour before going back to the front line soon. These men are painfully aware that more soldiers are only part of the equation. Their ultimate fate will be decided in Washington under perhaps a Trump presidency and in other Western capitals, where they're poring over what military aid to send here. Platoon commander, call sign Fedya, has a bleak assessment of the year to come.
Я вважаю, що наразі Україна не виграє війну. Наразі Україна стала в мертву точку і просто чекає надалі розгорнутих подій. Або це буде перемога наша, або перемога над нами. Це буде все напряму залежати від того, як всі наші там західні партнери, країни НАТО.
The Russians have been stockpiling missiles through the winter, and the year began with waves of attacks on Ukraine designed to exhaust air defences. The battle for the skies will be important in 2024, particularly as F-16 fighter jets from the west join the fray. Perhaps Ukraine's greatest challenge, though, is this: creating a society, an economy, that's on a permanent war footing for years to come.
The first year, there was a lot of shock and kind of self-improvisation. Ukrainians were demonstrating they're able to fight. Second year, they actually show they can push Russian troops out of 50% of what the territory they've controlled successfully. This year, if Ukrainians are really serious about going all the way to the borders of 1991, will require shifting its economy more towards defense production, which they are doing. They've increased 40% of a strategic defense budget this year. They're basically almost using all income generated by Ukrainian economy for defense.
Ukraine is now consolidating positions and supply. It's not headline grabbing like offensives and counteroffensives, but it's necessary. The worry for Zelensky is this: that over the months to come, the backroom, boring, essential stuff becomes the war the West forgets.